Joe, before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves...
The clock was ticking down to its absolute final seconds, the arena roaring with deafening sound, and every single eye in the sports world was locked onto one frame. Angel Reese caught the ball in prime position right under the basket. The exact moment every elite athlete dreams about, with a single straightforward layup standing between her team and ultimate victory. What happened next wasn't just a missed basket. It was a catastrophic failure on the biggest stage imaginable as the ball bounced off the rim, rolling harmlessly away as the buzzer sounded. Within minutes, social media ignited like a wildfire. But the true hammer blow came the very next morning when Stephen A. Smith took his seat on national television. He didn't hold back. He didn't pull punches. And he delivered a ruthless, unfiltered reality check that tore down months of hype surrounding Reese while boldly placing Caitlin Clark on an untouchable pedestal. That single missed shot didn't just cost a game. It blew the lid off the most toxic, explosive rivalry in modern sports history, leaving fans demanding answers about what really happens when the cameras stop rolling. To truly understand how a single missed layup could spark a national media war, you have to rewind to the moment this deep-seated feud was born in the fires of college basketball. The 2023 NCAA Women's National Championship game was supposed to be a celebration of the sport's immense growth, but instead it became a battleground of personalities, cultures, and play styles. When Angel Reese hit Caitlin Clark with the famous "you can't see me" hand gesture near the end of LSU's decisive victory, she knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't just win a title. She purposely cast herself as the antagonist to basketball's newest golden child. Overnight, the sports world fractured into two passionate camps, creating a polarizing dynamic that drove ratings through the roof while laying the groundwork for relentless scrutiny. Reese leaned entirely into her bold, unapologetic persona, building a massive social media following and securing lucrative endorsement deals by presenting herself as the villain who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. However, taking on that specific villain role meant that any mistake she made would be amplified 10 times over by a waiting mob of critics. When both players made their highly anticipated leap to the One Bay, the narrative shifted from college hype to the cold, undeniable reality of professional metrics. Caitlin Clark immediately faced intense physical defense, targeted schemes, and aggressive full-court pressure. Yet she still managed to shatter all-time league records for assists, scoring, and viewership metrics. On the other side, Angel Reese quickly made headlines by posting historical double-double streaks, establishing herself as one of the most dominant offensive rebounders the league had ever seen. But as analysts began digging deeper into the advanced analytics, a troubling trend emerged that critics refused to ignore. A significant percentage of Reese's offensive rebounds were actually coming off her own missed shots right around the rim, leading to severe online backlash, accusing her of inflating her statistics. While her physical presence was undeniable, her field goal percentage inside the paint was shockingly low for a post player, creating a dangerous narrative that her offensive skill set was deeply flawed. All of that mounting tension exploded during one fateful night when the entire basketball community was watching Reese's every move on the court. With her team down by a single point in the final seconds of a crucial matchup, the play was drawn up specifically for her to use her physicality and score right at the basket. She got the ball right where she wanted it, isolated against a defender, but instead of executing a clean finish, she rushed the shot, hit the underside of the rim, and failed to convert what should have been a routine bucket. The immediate aftermath was brutal, as clips of the missed play went viral across TikTok, X, and YouTube, accumulating millions of views in just a few short hours. Fans didn't just mock the missed shot. They used it as absolute proof that her entire playing style was unrefined compared to the surgical long-range brilliance of Caitlin Clark. But as bad as the social media storm was, the true political fallout was only just beginning to take shape. The very next morning on ESPN's First Take, Stephen A. Smith brought down the hammer with a masterclass in aggressive, unfiltered sports journalism. Leaning directly into the camera with his signature intensity, Stephen A. blasted the notion that Reese belonged in the exact same breath as Clark when it came to sheer basketball impact. He didn't just focus on the missed layup. He ripped apart her overall offensive game, highlighting her struggle to finish efficiently around the basket and calling out analysts who attempted to shield her from legitimate criticism. Smith boldly argued that while Ree is an elite rebounder, Clark is a transcendent generational talent who fundamentally alters how defense is played across the entire league. He pointed out the massive disparity in TV ratings, arena attendance, and overall cultural relevance, claiming that attempting to push a fake narrative of total equality between the two players was completely dishonest to the audience. His dramatic broadcast shattered the polished media narrative, turning what was once a protected debate into an open season of brutal direct critique. That explosive television segment proved to be the final blow to what had been hyped up as a close Rookie of the Year race. Up until that point, mainstream sports networks had tried to maintain an artificial sense of suspense, keeping voters engaged by framing the award as a razor-thin competition between Reese's rebounding dominance and Clark's offensive mastery. But after Stephen A. Smith's public dismantling combined with Clark's historic triple-doubles and playoff push, the debate collapsed almost overnight. Insiders and former players began speaking out more openly, admitting that Clark's ability to pull defenses from 40 FT out and elevate her entire roster made her the runaway winner. The official voting results ended up being a sweeping blowout, completely validating Smith's commentary and leaving Reese's most vocal supporters feeling isolated and targeted. The award was decided, but the bad blood between the two factions reached an all-time high, leaking out into media appearances and personal podcasts. Refusing to stay quiet and let commentators dictate her legacy, Angel Reese fired right back by taking full advantage of her own media ecosystem. Launching her popular podcast, Unapologetically Angel, she used the platform to directly address the hate, air out her grievances with mainstream sports networks, and call out perceived bias in the media. She openly questioned why her defensive contributions and historic rebounding efforts were continually downplayed, accusing certain high-profile commentators of feeding into toxic online narratives for quick viral clicks. Ree implied that the intense, relentless media scrutiny went far beyond normal sports critique, suggesting that certain outlets were intentionally setting her up to fail to protect their favored stars. Her comments sparked yet another wave of fierce debate across online platforms, dividing fans between those who admired her fearless honesty and those who viewed her statements as deflection from her once-court struggles. Behind the scenes, the drama surrounding this public war was even more intense than what played out on television screens. Whispers began circulating throughout league circles about growing frustrations among veteran players who felt completely overshadowed by the non-stop media circus surrounding the rookies. Reports surfaced detailing how opposing teams were intentionally bringing extra physical energy when playing against Clark while simultaneously taking personal satisfaction in shutting down Reese's paint production. The massive financial disparity created by massive signature shoe deals, private jet travel disputes, and unprecedented corporate sponsorships added even more fuel to the fire behind closed locker room doors. Players who had spent decades building the league were suddenly forced to answer constant questions about rookie feuds, creating an underlying atmosphere of silent tension that threatened to boil over at any given moment. What makes this entire situation so fascinating is how it represents a dramatic shift in how women's sports are consumed, analyzed, and commercialized in the modern era. For years, media coverage of women's basketball was notoriously soft, avoiding harsh critique in favor of positive, inspirational narratives that rarely questioned a player's performance. The brutal fallout from Reese's missed layup and Stephen A. Smith's explosive critique proved that the sport has officially entered a whole new era of ruthless big league media scrutiny. Players are now held to the exact same unforgiving standards as stars in the NBA or NFL, where every missed clutch shot is dissected, debated by millions of viewers worldwide. This newfound intensity brings unimaginable pressure, but it also generates the exact kind of dramatic, narrative-driven interest that drives massive multi-million-dollar television contracts and packed arenas. As the dust finally settles on this historic, chaotic chapter, both players find themselves standing at a critical crossroads in their careers. Caitlin Clark has firmly established herself as the central face of women's basketball, breaking records and carrying unprecedented expectations on her shoulders every time she steps onto the floor. Angel Reese, meanwhile, faces a defining offseason where she must either develop a reliable offensive game to silence her harshest critics or remain vulnerable to the exact same medias. takedowns in the future. Their personal dynamic may be fraught with tension, rivalry, and public clashes, but there is no denying that their fierce conflict has permanently altered the landscape of sports entertainment forever. The only real question left hanging in the air is whether Angel Reese will use Stephen A. Smith's ruthless humiliation as the ultimate motivation to rebuild her game, or if the insurmountable pressure of this legendary rivalry will finally prove to be too much to bear. Every single camera angle captured the exact moment of realization on Angel Reese's face after that ball clanked off the back of the iron. You could see the sheer disbelief, the sudden drop in energy, and the immediate understanding that this wasn't just another missed shot in an ordinary regular season game. In modern sports culture, where every second is archived, clipped, and monetized, a mistake of that magnitude during a high-stakes sequence is an absolute death sentence for a player's public relations standing. Within 30 seconds of the final horn, fan accounts on X and Instagram had already uploaded slow-motion edits set to mocking audio tracks, mocking her post moves, and highlighting her shooting percentages. The comment sections turned into an absolute bloodbath of hot takes, with thousands of users claiming that this single play exposed the reality of her skill set once and for all. What made the internet reaction so uniquely intense was the buildup leading into this specific moment. For months, media outlets had built a narrative around Reese as an unstoppable force down low, a player whose relentless energy and rebounding prowess could mask any technical shortcomings in her offensive repertoire. But elite sports analysis doesn't care about narratives. It cares about efficiency, mechanics, and results. When the game is on the line, opposing coaches had already begun revealing the blueprint on how to guard her, packing the paint, sitting on her right hand, and daring her to make contested finishes over length. When she missed that point-blank game winner, it served as concrete evidence for every critic who argued that her scoring numbers were inflated by secondary opportunities rather than pure offensive mastery. When morning hit, ESPN's production studios were primed for chaos. Knowing that millions of viewers were tuning in specifically to hear how the flagship sports show would handle the incident, Stephen A. Smith did not disappoint the bloodthirsty audience. Striding onto the set with the deliberate, heavy energy of a judge preparing to deliver a final verdict. He sat across from Shannon Sharpe, leaned forward over his desk, and stared directly into the main broadcast camera with an expression that combined total disbelief with supreme confidence. He started off by stating that while he respects the passion and hustle Angel Reese brings to the hardwood every night, the media dishonesty surrounding her actual basketball production had officially reached an unbearable level. He declared that it was time to strip away the PR gloss, throw out the diplomatic answers, and talk about basketball in its purest, rawest form. Stephen A. Smith pointed out that in professional basketball, a post player who shoots under 45% from inside 5FT is simply not operating at an elite level, regardless of how many double-doubles they accumulate on paper. He broke down the tape verbally, explaining how Reese consistently rushes her shots around the rim, lacks a counter move when her initial shoulder charge is absorbed, and relies heavily on grabbing her own missed attempts to pad her box score stats. Smith didn't hesitate to pull back the curtain on the entire media apparatus, accusing television executives and analysts of pushing a manufactured narrative to keep the Rookie of the Year race artificial and competitive. He openly questioned why analysts who normally shred male NBA players for poor shooting percentages suddenly became defensive and protective when evaluating Reese's obvious technical flaws. Then came the pivot that sent shockwaves across every sports news outlet in America. The direct, unvarnished comparison to Caitlin Clark. Stephen A. Smith pounded his desk as he explained that comparing Caitlin Clark to Angel Reese is like comparing a legendary Hall of Fame orchestrator to a hard-working role player. He emphasized that Clark's presence alone fundamentally changes how an entire opponent defense operates from the second she steps over half court. Teams are forced to pick her up 40 FT out, double team her off screens, and vacate the paint just to prevent her from pulling up for logo three-pointers or dropping laser passes to wide open teammates. Smith shouted that Clark's gravity opens up the entire floor for her teammates, driving television viewership to millions of households that had never watched a single NBA game in their entire lives. To drive his point home, Stephen A. brought out the raw, cold business metrics that sports executives usually prefer to discuss behind closed doors. He pointed out that arenas across the country were selling out at inflated ticket prices exclusively when Caitlin Clark came to town, while TV ratings plummeted by massive percentages whenever she wasn't on the broadcast. He argued that while Angel Reese certainly brought celebrity culture, fashion credentials, and viral pop culture appeal to the league. Clark was the actual engine driving the entire sports economic renaissance. Smith stated unequivocally that trying to frame them as equals on the court was an insult to basketball purists, calling Clark the undisputed best rookie and the singular force carrying the league into a new financial paradigm. The immediate media fallout from Smith's broadcast was instantaneous, causing ripples through sports radio, podcast networks, and player locker rooms across the country. Fans who had spent the whole season defending Reese felt personally attacked by Smith's aggressive delivery, accusing him of using his massive platform to bully a young athlete who was still adjusting to the pro game. On the flip side, Clark's massive, hyper-dedicated fan base celebrated the segment as long overdue validation from mainstream sports media, using Smith's exact quotes to dominate online arguments. The segment didn't just go viral, it became the central talking point for sports debates over the next 3 weeks, completely overshadowing actual game results and playoff matchups. The voting for the Rookie of the Year award, which had been presented as a tight neck-and-neck battle by casual media outlets for months, ended up being a complete landmine for Reese's camp. When the final official ballot was revealed to the public, Caitlin Clark captured 66 out of 67 first-place votes, handing her one of the most dominant victories in the history of the award. The near-unanimous vote was a staggering validation of Stephen A. Smith's rant, proving that the actual voters, journalists, coaches, and sports writers, viewed the gap between the two rookies as a wide canyon rather than a narrow ditch. For Reese, who had built her entire brand on proving her doubters wrong, the single lone vote she received felt more like a pity token than a genuine sign of respect, deepening the rift between her camp and the national media establishment.